What is up, YouTube producers? Welcome to the channel. This is Broke Shady. We got a good one for you today. I'm going to be showing you in this video how to make beats like one of my favorite of all time producers, MADLIB. And I love his collabs with MF Doom and especially with Freddie Gibbs. So I'm going to be showing you how to chop samples like MADLIB and how he lays his drums on the beats. And I just want to be clear, this is not a step-by-step guide. I'm not going to say put this knob at this setting. It's nothing like that. This is purely my process, what I do, what I figured out that works for me. And the point of these videos is to kind of inspire you guys and show you how I go through things. You don't have to copy this exactly. That's not the point of this. What I want you to be able to do is take something from this and put your own spin on it. Take this and use it and make your own. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so for my tracks, here we are. What I normally do, I'm just going to delete some of these I don't need. I usually start with one audio track for my sample and then just a MIDI track for my drums, and I'll just throw in a empty drum rack right there so we can fill this up with some samples later. But usually when I'm making a MADLIB type beat where I'm going to be cutting a sample up, I'll just start with the sample, which would make the most sense. So when I was early in the game of making beats, one of my first big issues was finding samples. I could never find ones that I really liked and that didn't sound too cheesy. I was looking for more of like a raw sound. So I usually find my samples on YouTube and Reddit. There's a lot of places you can find them. You just have to be willing to dive deep and spend, you know, maybe a couple hours if you have to, just to find something, and it will definitely be worth it. Okay, so right here I've got my sample that I just found. I'm gonna start with this one. I don't really know where it's gonna go from here, but we'll start with this and see what happens, I guess. So there's just a little intro to whatever this song is. Maybe I'll come back and use this, I don't know. So I'm just going to cut this right here because I know this is where I want my sample to end. So I'm just going to take this and just drag it back. So I got the end of my sample there, and then you just cut this back to where you want your sample to start. And then what I'm going to do from here is take it so it lines up with the grid, starting right on this downbeat here, and then we're just gonna find a tempo that works for this. So it looks like it's pretty close already. It's almost stretching to this bar here, 23. So I'm just gonna change the metronome here until this is close to there. So I'm gonna turn on my metronome, and hopefully this should somewhat line up. And it doesn't line up at all. Oh, whoops. I have this as a 6-bar phrase, but it should be an 8-bar phrase. So I really want this to end at 25, not 23. So I'm going to change this here until right around there. Let's see how that looks. Come on. Almost dead on. So let's hear how that sounds with the metronome. And now, this doesn't have to be perfect. It all kind of depends on what you're going for here. but it's just going to make your life a lot easier if you start with the sample and the metronome and try to get the sample as close to these beats as you can. Now, if you wanted to, you could sit down here for hours and try to make each little beat right exactly on. Sometimes it sounds more artistic and more human and flowing if you just leave it as is. Other times you got to go in and do some surgery to make it sound right. Now, I'm not completely satisfied with this right now, so I'm just going to go in and do a little bit of tweaking to see if I can get this to line up a little bit better. Okay, so that tempo I think works great for this little first section here. So I'm just going to do this and loop it to be 4 instead of 8. Yeah, so once you have this sample lined up to the grid, this is where you can start having some fun, doing some chop ups. I don't know, maybe I would just take each bar, chop it up that way. It's really however you hear it, however you can get creative as you want with this. Okay, so as you can see, I didn't chop this up too complex like here, just a few little edits. I'm not gonna go too crazy. Maybe down the road I'll come back and tweak some things. So what I'm gonna do next is take my sample and figure out if I like the pitch and the speed and all that. Maybe I'll make some adjustments there, see if there's something that might work better for me. So I'm gonna start by taking all these little chunks here, highlighting them, and I'm gonna warp that to complex mode. And then from there, what I think I want to do is change the BPM, make this a little slower, and see how that sounds. So I'm thinking that's a good tempo right there. I think I'm going to mess with the pitch of this sample, see if I can find something else I like here. And one thing you definitely want to take notice of here is when you're changing the pitch, it might alter the sound, you know? As it's going up or down, you might get some digital effects going on. So it's always important to check the warp mode. Right now I'm using complex, but you might want to go through these and see if there's one that sounds better for the sound that you're going for. Okay, so one thing I went back to change here is I just made a chop right here towards the end, and then I pitched this one up so it creates a little bit of tension there. So right there, that makes it sound a little bit more dark. Like I said, it adds some tension. So doing things like that, especially towards the end of your loop, can just be a cool effect you can try. You can also do it at the beginning, up to you. Okay, I think it's time for some drums now. So I have a kick and a snare that I like. Whoops, not that one. I think it was that one. So I'm gonna go ahead and lay down just a kick snare pattern. Okay, so I'm gonna go through and just clean some of that up. Hit it with the old Command U to quantize. And I don't like that quantize setting. So if you go right click here to quantize settings, you can mess with all this. Let's see, I want 16th, and we'll make it a little more subtle. now that I have my snare and kick pattern, I'm going to go back in and add some hi-hats. Here's my sample. Where is it? And here's a little trick you could do. If you notice here with this sample, it doesn't actually start right at the beginning. If I wanted to, I would put it right there. But I'm going to leave it like this so that when I quantize it, the hi-hat will always be a little bit late. Okay, so now that I have a basic idea, I've got my sample, I've got my drums, now I'm going to go back and do a little bit of mixing to make this pop a lot more. So the first thing I want to do is I have nothing going on with my sample here. So I'm going to bring up an EQ and a compressor. I'll turn this off for a second so I can get my EQ going. So essentially what you're doing right here with the EQ, the first thing you want to do is decide which parts of the sample you want to actually use. So most of this stuff in the bass here is not really important. It's just kind of muddying up my mix, so I took a lot of that out. And then there's some strings in this sample that you can't really hear too well, so I just boosted these highs a little bit so that will cut through. And then I just lowered this mid-range here to make some more room for those highs. Okay, so I'm liking that EQ to start with. Now I'm going to go over to my compressor and I want to do some sidechain compression going on with the drums and the sample here. So I put this compressor on my sample and I'm going to take my input over here. By the way, to open this menu, it's just this triangle here. So I'm going to take my sidechain, make sure that's on, and I'm taking the audio from the drum rack. And over here is the EQ, which is going to affect the way it's compressing. So I have it on the low, so it's going to grab mostly from the kick drum and affect and compress my sample based on when the kick drum hits are. So let's see how that sounds. So in doing that right there with my sidechain compression, what that's doing is kind of tying these two elements together so that they work, you know, as one unit instead of two things that are just happening simultaneously. They're affecting each other and it sounds more like one mix. Okay, so now that I have that going the way I like it and I took all the bass out of my sample, what I want to do is come back and actually add that in using my own bass, maybe an 808 or something. So okay, we've got a sample, we've got some drums, and we've got an 808. So, I mean, technically that right there is a beat. If you want to call it a day, you can right there. But what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in here, take my drums and bass, maybe copy some of this out. So I'm going to select everything, Command D to duplicate that. And now I got my original beat here, and now I'm just going to loop this and make a little variation. So one thing that I notice a lot of producers struggling with is they get themselves into, they kind of corner themselves basically by making a loop or a phrase that's just way too short. So then when you make that into a beat and it's repeated, it's too repetitive because that repetitiveness is too short. So what you want to try to do is make your phrases longer. So what I just did there is I took the same thing, duplicated it, and just changed it a little bit so it wasn't exactly the same, and boom, I just made my phrase twice as long. And then when you repeat this over, it doesn't sound as boring or repetitive. Yeah, I think I like that warp mode a little bit better. The complex. I don't know why the pro, sometimes it works for me, sometimes it don't. So I want to go back to my sample here and the mixing. I like what's going on here, but I think it just needs a little bit of something else to give it a little bit more of a push. So I'm going to go to utilities here. They have a lot of great, where is it? Audio effect racks. So I'll go to the mixing and mastering ones. Let me see. And then another thing I want to do, just to give this sample here a little bit more life, sometimes what I'll do is I'll take an auto filter and put some of that on there, but put my auto filter on the high pass instead of the low pass. And I want to stress here, it's important to get experimental. Try all these filters and effects that you never used before, because you're not going to find the new sound just doing the same thing over and over again. You got to step outside the box, try something you never tried before, use a sample that you never thought you would have used. So that right there is the basics. In another video down the road, I will go over more about how to extend your beats and make it more into a song, add different sections and things like that. But for this video, I just wanted to get a basic beat going, a few things on how to chop up the samples and lay down something. So that's gonna do it for this video. If you guys have any questions, just feel free to leave a comment below. I plan on doing a lot more videos like this, tutorial style. So if there's anything else you guys want to see, just let me know. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing that. Broke Shady out.